morning. Welcome to our Boardwalk Talk series brought to you by the aquarium at the Dauphin Island Sea Lab. My name is Mendel Graber. I am one of the educators at the Dauphin Island Sea Lab. And this morning we are going to chat with Greg Graber, no relation, just kidding, my husband, who works here as an educator in the Discovery Hall programs. And he is going to talk to us about an assortment of different animals that sort of have a seasonal theme in their names. So with that, I'm going to let Greg tell you about some of them.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Sea Lab. And yes, so we thought we have had quite a bit of really intense science talks over the last several Boardwalk talks. So we're going to use the season as kind of a fun, lighthearted talk about creatures that live in the ocean that have kind of this seasonal festive theme going on, from stuff that's actually not alive anymore all the way up to some things that you might recognize at other aquariums and that sort of thing that you might have seen live at some places, and to dispel some of the myths of this time of year that has been kind of perpetrated by pop culture and popular culture about some of the seasonal ideas of the time. So without further ado, we'll get started. And again, if you have any questions, we will try to answer them in the chat or ask away about some of the critters that we're talking about. And so hopefully it'll be a good time. And so we will go ahead and get started by kind of knocking out one of the myths that has been perpetrated for a long time about winter animals and this holiday season. And so we will get started with this picture right here. And you may have seen this commercial years ago. And if you buy kids' clothes and that sort of thing around this time of the year, you will see one of the Christmas / wintertime mess-ups, and that is penguins hanging out with polar bears. All right, this is one of those marine science soapboxes that will never happen in the natural world. They are they're 10,000 miles away from one another on polar opposites. All right, so polar bear being an Arctic species, and then of course we have our penguins, right? And even the northernmost penguins never make it across the equator in the southern hemisphere, and they occur down in the southern parts of the world, all right? And we know this for a fact because one of our graduate students that did a Boardwalk talk just recently, Will Valentine, is actually down in Antarctica right now, and someone posted a question of his, any penguins? And he says lots and lots and lots of penguins right now. So he is in the Antarctic doing research as we speak. And so, one, they're not going to be drinking Coke, but two, these two animals that you commonly see together are not actually ever together. So much so that I'd like to think that Gary Larson knew this as well, besides just the funny that the polar bear is dressed up as a penguin, that there's something strange going on here with the two hanging out together in this comic strip. So with that, the rest of the story about some of these animals is that they are very diverse in their names of Christmas / festive themes and wintertime themes. And one of the more interesting ones that is talked about a lot in marine science and has been mentioned in multiple Boardwalk talks due to our study of plankton here and other things is something that's not an animal at all, or at least not a live animal. And this just makes it hard to see. You kind of have to watch a video. But if you Google marine snow, and of course the country around here is kind of experiencing cold, and you can see we're kind of decked out today in cold weather clothes because for down here 30 degrees is pretty chilly on the coastline. We haven't got any snow, but this is an important player in ocean energy cycles. All right, and so as we know what the term snow is, moisture that's falling down, that's frozen, but this is actually a term used in the ocean, not for anything frozen, but for actually dead rotten stuff. All right, dead rotten decaying matter that is making it from the surface down to the bottom. Now, who cares about dead stuff falling down from the bottom? Well, the ocean is the largest habitat on the planet, and when you have this massive habitat and a lot of empty space in that habitat to transfer energy from the top, which is where 90% of the ocean life lives, which is a crazy fact to think about, in a habitat that averages 2.5+ miles, 90% of ocean life lives in the first couple of football fields deep. So 660 feet or so is where 90% of all the ocean life lives. But what about all the ones under that threshold? And so you have to be able to get energy and food and resources down to some of those deeper water creatures. All right? And so with that, this is how we do it. Dead rotten stuff falling down from the top. And so that is how it gets the name marine snow. And if you Google any of the videos or you watch Planet Earth, you'll see that stuff kind of moving around. All right? And so that takes the energy from the top down to the bottom. And when you make it to the bottom, what you get as another really cool creature about this time of the year is what are called Christmas tree worms. And you can see these in aquariums and that sort of thing around the world. And they come in amazing colors. They're really, really pretty, so you can understand why they're in the aquarium trade. But this is a specific group of worms that they use these Christmas tree looks to them as twofold. They are adapted for respiration, and they're adapted to suspension feed, which is to take the marine snow and the detritus and plankton out of the water to feed the worms. And what you see here is actually the two tentacles or plumes of the worms that are sticking out of the holes that these worms burrow into corals.
Where's the plumes? Can you point it out on the
picture? The
picture?
plumes are these funny Christmas tree shaped things that range from white to red to blue to yellows. They are dramatic in their colors, and that's why people love them in their aquarium, and they're super popular in the aquarium trade. But they are native just south of here, really, and you can find them in different places around the Caribbean and that sort of thing sticking out, which is pretty fun. And one of the fun things is that if you ever see them at a touch tank in an aquarium and you get near them, once they feel a pressure wave or something coming at them, they will retract really quickly. If you wait a minute, you'll see them slowly stick these plumes back out, and then they'll yank back in if they feel threatened or not. But what they belong to is a group of worms that are called polychaetes. And so that term, with our worm researchers around here, that term means polychaete, means it's got a lot of the chaete part are called setae, and so the rhyme is polychaetes many feet, but they're really not exactly feet, but they do help them burrow and move around. And they are cousins of earthworms because they're segmented in the much bigger group known as segmented worms. So that is actually what is underneath the plumes, is some version of this kind of worm right here. And we catch these a lot. They're the polychaetes, like we showed, that's a really big one, but we catch them a lot at our salt marsh that we've done several of these boardwalk talks and other Facebook events at live. So
are the Christmas tree worms as long as that worm?
No. Generally, it's about 4 centimeters, I think, is big. And the plumes can be about that tall as well. So no, they're not quite as large as that one. That's a fairly large one. And the ones that I have caught at our salt marsh, I have caught one when it extended from about my elbow to the end of my finger.
Not the Christmas tree worms.
Not a Christmas tree worm. As I said, they're not the ones that hang out in the marsh, but we catch their cousins, the other polychaete type worms in our marsh. Okay? So with that, we have, of course, tree toppers, right? And since we've got the Christmas tree, we've got our sea stars. And for us, the big, giant, fancy ones that you see up top, and the ones with the multiple arms, these guys are not local to our area. So our most common, by far, sea star in the north central Gulf of Mexico that we catch quite a bit is this guy right here. And this is what is called a Slender Star. And these guys are highly entertaining in an aquarium as well. And so every once in a while when we catch them, we will collect a few and put them in our classroom aquariums. And one of the fun things that people don't realize is just how predatory these sea stars are. And they are highly, highly, highly predatory. And one of the things that people love to collect at the beach are small clams that like to dig in the sand. And the small clams that like to dig in the sand, the Coquinas, this is not a Coquina, but it's small enough that if you collected this and you dropped it into an aquarium with this Slender Star that we collect quite a bit here at the lab, by the next morning, the aquarium is littered with what looks like something ate sunflower seeds in the aquarium. And all of these small Coquinas and small clams that you drop in have been eaten and then spit out. And so you get the butterfly clam effect that a lot of people call them when they're stuck together. And it's because that particular animal has chowed down upon them, which is kind of fun. And so we do have a live sea star that's not quite as common, but it is local and farther offshore right here. And you can see some cool adaptations about it because the bright orange stripes right here are home to its hundreds of little tiny tube feet, and this one is sticking to the side of our critter keeper here. And sea stars, of course, are in a really interesting group of animals called Echinoderms. And if you know anything about Echinoderms, then you know that they are probably the greatest, most odd group of creatures on the planet. They're like aliens that live here for lots of reasons. And one of them is to be able to walk around with all those little feet is they use water and water pressure to send suction cup-like actions, creating vacuums and suction to be able to crawl around. And one of the fun things that a lot of people don't realize is that when they feed, their mouth is underneath them, which a lot of people do know, but their mouth doesn't possess teeth or anything like that, so they actually, a lot of the times, will invert their stomach out of their mouth to digest food like clams and oysters and shell and other things. So this one's been crawling around since we put it in the critter keeper so people can see it as the topper on the tree. How it gets all the water in is through this large hole on top called a madreporite. There's a larger hole right there, and that's where it pulls in that water to use that water vascular system, as it is called, which is kind of a neat, different idea of a system that most, and not all, other animals don't possess. Just those echinoderms do, which is really, really cool. So that's kind of neat. So moving on.
So a different tree topper.
Yeah, a different kind of tree topper is right here. And this is one of the stranger animals on the planet. This is a group of animals called Pteropods. And this particular species of them are called sea angels. Right here. And of course you can see why. And those creatures are planktonic in nature, but they are a type of mollusk. And they lack a shell, and they swim, sort of. They do swim, they move around a little bit. And with those wings, and these guys actually are feeding upon the other cousins of theirs, the other pteropods, which is kind of interesting.
Where do you find these guys?
In the upper section of the water column, kind of the world over.
All over the world?
I don't know. I know they drift around, and pteropods are pretty common around the world.
Are they microscopic?
Yeah. Small, very small. So probably on the range of millimeters to microscopic. They do not get large. So this is magnified quite a bit right here to make them large. But pteropods are really interesting. It's a really fun Google if you Google pteropods, just because they look like cartoon characters or some kind of abstract art.
If you Google pteropod, put a P in front of it.
Correct. For like pterodactyl. All right. So meaning
PT.
PT because of the wings. All right.
Are they single cell organisms?
No, multicellular because they're animals and they belong to the mollusk group. So, other fun ones that
Another mollusk.
another mollusk. to continue the talk is, you can hear how they get their name. These are the jingle shells. These are the jingle shells, and which are commonly found on our shoreline, and they're really interesting because they can be completely translucent all the way to dark black or gray out on our shorelines. And these jingle shells people might recognize at places, at gift shops, when you buy wind chimes and stuff with ocean shells and stuff that kind of jingle jangle in the wind. This is part of the jingle jangle. The problem is that to find them whole and to keep them that way is a little bit difficult because they're very, very, very fragile. Okay, and as you can see through this one. This one is pretty translucent.
In our family, we sometimes substitute jingle shells for jingle bells.
That's right. And,
In the song.
But they are susceptible to predation. And so with that thin shell, it doesn't take nearly as long for one of these to be attacked by their snail cousins because their shell is so thin to be able to make the jingle. And so with that whole, this particular shell was eaten by one of the common coastal shells that is related to it, but is a snail. And so it could be an oyster drill, or it could be something like a moon snail. This one happens to be covered in barnacles, but these two shells are the ones that give you the hole for your necklace you make on your vacations at the beach here, which is kind of fun. But these are jingle shells.
So since their shells are so thin, is it much easier for them to be eaten as opposed to some of the other mollusks?
I would think so, especially with having to drill through the shell. So if you look at how thin this shell is, from even just our typical oyster right here, you can see the edge of the shell versus the edges of this shell. This one's almost paper thin. This one's got, 1/4 of an inch of shell to it. So that would definitely make it a longer time to kill this particular one.
I don't see as many holes in jingle shells.
That's true.
There could be different reasons for that. It might just be that the jingle shells are crushed and we just don't see the numbers of them. It could be that there's something more attractive about some of the thicker shells, even though they would take longer to drill through. So that's kind of an interesting question, and I don't know the answer.
I don't either. But they are common on the shore, and you can find whole ones, but because they're fragile, if I just put a little bit of pressure on this, it would snap in my fingers without any trouble. They are quite fragile in their body. So, as we continue on down the line, do we have any questions? Okay.
Yeah, we have a comment from Brandy. She says,
cool.
Christmas tree worms are so pretty.
That's true.
I have a question. As we talk about the Slender Star and the Sea Star,
Right.
so the Slender Star over here, he's all bleached and white, but these creatures in nature are actually very beautiful in their colors.
Well, okay, so a lot of them are, and a lot of sea stars, range in color from bright orange to blues to purples. Ours do not. This is about what you get when you catch a live one here. So this one's a little bit bleached out, but they are this kind of dull gray, not pretty looking sea star like you would buy at an aquarium kind of thing. And they occur right off our beaches here when we are out collecting on just the south of the island side. And so that Slender Star versus something as pretty as this, which is definitely called offshore, or the margin star that's bright orange along the edge that lives around here. These couple of different species, you got to go a little bit farther offshore for us to find them, and this one you don't. This one is super common.
When Greg says when we're collecting, he doesn't mean collecting right at the water's edge at the beach. He means when we're trawling in our vessel.
Correct.
Because echinoderms don't have a very high tolerance for low salinity. They like salty water. And we have a big inflow right between Dauphin Island, the east end of Dauphin Island and Port Morgan Peninsula of that brackish water out to Mobile Bay. And then the longshore currents carry that water along the south shore of Dauphin Island. So there's a lot of that low salinity water flowing along the south side of Dauphin Island on our beach, but we don't find that many echinoderms on our beaches, like sand dollars and sea stars, as you find on some beaches.
Especially whole, definitely. Yeah. One of the ones live ones, yeah. And one of the ones you can find live around here is in our brackish water, living at the bottom, in our muddy bottoms is something called a brittle star. And so you can see it kind of looks like 5 worms stuck together in a circle. And that's kind of what they look like. But the brittle stars are well known for their abilities. That's the mouth right there in the center. The brittle stars are well known for the regeneration properties that other starfish possess. But these guys self-amputate themselves readily and then regenerate really, really quickly, hence the name brittle stars, all right? They break quickly, intentionally, and then can regenerate. And that is true of our slender stars. These, you can see, this is not broken from being dead. This is broken from when we caught it. And it actually has a nub sticking right off the edge. It's not a straight break right there. And that is the ability of this one to regenerate. And so these slender stars actually grow and regenerate much more quickly than something like this guy right here. Something from farther away. So, pretty neat. All right, so whenever you think about this time, most people think about food too, right? And so there's a lot of creatures. There are a lot of creatures named after food types, and one of the ones that is also very common in the aquarium trade, like the Christmas tree worm, is this little guy. And so you probably have seen this at aquariums, or if you have a saltwater aquarium yourself, you maybe have seen this one as well. It's a jumper. We have been told that it's a jumper, and this is a peppermint shrimp. And why they are popular in aquariums, one, obviously, is that they're super cool looking and they're really pretty with all their peppermint white and red stripes. But number two is that, again, they are a detritivore. So that marine snow at the very beginning, the dead rotten stuff, plant and animal material that falls down, these shrimp on reefs and on rigs and on the bottoms of the ocean, these guys will help recycle that nutrients. They'll break it down even further. And that is one of the things that people use in aquariums to help keep their aquariums a little bit cleaner. But more importantly than that is that as an aquarium trade fish, they actually eat and have the ability to eat a small tank invader that is an anemone. And so they will eat them off of your glass in your aquarium that can take over your aquarium, unfortunately, and cause aquariums to kind of biofoul with little tiny anemones that are stuck to the glass. These will particularly eat them. And so there's not a whole lot about their biology and what they do. They're detritivores and really popular in the aquarium trade, but they are important to keeping an aquarium clean, also to keep their aquarium looking cool because of their neat striping and their color patterns. So that's kind of fun. And then, last but certainly not least, what I got into all this about is sharks. And when you think of sharks in festive times, that's probably not the first thing you think of as a shark. But this particular one is one that gets a lot of press in sharky materials. And this is not a super common species that you'll see around here. And this is a type of Gulper Shark. And what that means is that they can actually gulp air. But more importantly, this one gets the Christmas theme for its teeth, right? And so this is a type of cookie cutter shark, which is super awesome. And the cookie cutter shark is well known for its teeth and their abilities. One, they live fairly deep. Two, their ability to make a cookie cutter circle out of their prey. So they're kind of an ectoparasite that doesn't stay attached like a lamprey or an isopod might. They are an ectoparasite that swims up, grabs on, does a little twist with these cookie cutter-like sharp teeth here, and those cookie cutter-like sharp teeth will take that plug right out of the side of a dolphin, a seal. They have seen it scrape paint on submarines, large whales, and other things. And so you'll see kind of a bloody circle that's a damage wound. And it's not deep, it's fairly superficial, but it's kind of like a strawberry, I guess, is what it would be like, except it's a chunk taken out off of the side of its prey.
And where did that specimen come from?
This specimen came from our shark researchers about 5 years ago, farther out than we normally go. They caught it on their long line offshore. And this one's a little bit different. This one's really neat for several reasons. One is the skin, as we've talked about in the past on several of these, is that shark skin's really rough. But this one actually is so rough that you can't even really slide you're always told to pet the shark from head to tail and tail to head. The dermal denticles of this guy are incredibly rough, and it lacks one of the fins that most sharks have. This is a large group of sharks, and it lacks this back fin here, which is kind of interesting. And when they pulled it up, the eyeballs and their eyes are enormous for the size of the fish. I mean, the eye is an inch long on a fish that's only, maybe 20 inches long.
What function does that serve?
The eye, because it's a deep water fish, right? And so when it came up, it was neon green, glowing in the dark, to gather as much light as possible as a visual predator. Luckily, I guess if you're attaching to the side of a whale, you don't have to be very visually great, because that's a really big thing. But if it's dark, you want to be able to gather as much light as possible, and that's what that adaptation for that Christmas light eyeball.
Spiracles are high on its head, higher than...
Yeah, so again, it's a primitive shark, so it has spiracles, even though it doesn't sit on the bottom like the stingrays and other things.
And point out the spiracles.
So the spiracle is this modified gill on top, and so if you think of a stingray, which I didn't get out, they have the holes behind the eyes on the top of the ray. And the idea of the spiracle is if you're sitting on the bottom, your breathing apparatus is above the dirt line so that you don't bring in as much sediment to clog the gills.
Brandy had a question about, can we find these in the Gulf of Mexico?
Oh, yes. So these were caught, again, our shark researchers have one. I don't think in the numbers of like the thousands, the tens of thousands, 12, 15,000 sharks we tag and release in the last 10 years or so, the numbers of how many of these we have is very, very small. But yes, these were caught in-house by our shark researchers.
The nares on it are large too.
Yeah, and I assume again that has a lot to do with being able to track down food when it's dark. Not 100% sure, but it makes sense having a large eye and a large way to smell to be able to get to that food that you're searching for.
Did you have any final comments that you wanted to add?
Well, it's just one of the fun things that we never think about, but we mentioned several times, is that we name a lot of animals in the ocean after things on land that we associate with. So that's how these things get their names, is from things that we as humans associate with because we saw them on land first, and then we pulled them out of the ocean and, oh, that looks like a hammer for the hammerhead shark. Oh, that looks like a Christmas tree, or that looks like an angel, or something that we came up with, and we make these associations with these different animals that were, coming from the land and looking at things that we collected in the ocean. And that's how these guys, of course, get their names, which is pretty fun. But the diversity of these animals are fascinating with their distribution across habitats when we are looking at these kind of themed animals. And what lives regionally here, but also can live farther away in world oceans like the Coquinas shark and its cousins, and shrimp all the way up the east coast to Port Aransas. So you're talking about this wide distribution of these different cool animals.
So these organisms don't necessarily, or these phenomena, including the marine snare, don't necessarily have any association with Christmas other than their names or the associations that people have. But that this is just kind of a fun theme, and there are others. There are, it's kind of a popular theme for science teachers to come up with the list of these organisms. So Greg just pulled out a few, just because, of time constraints. But if any of you watching would like to contribute to the list of seasonal themed sea creatures or phenomena, please feel free to drop those in the comments. If you have any questions, that you would like to have answered, we'd be happy to answer them. If you comment, we will respond to those comments.
And Greg and Mendel, if y'all want to go over, we have several things coming up in the next 2 weeks where people can come and be with you on campus to learn more about these things.
Correct.
Yeah, from the aquarium, we are offering some of our excursions. We have some excursions to Salt Marsh and through the beach, maritime forest, and dune system, and then a couple of boat excursions. And so if you would like to join us for some of our excursions out into the field, you can find information about that on our website, disl.edu, under the Estuarium tab.
And then DHP has...
Correct. And then the Discovery Hall, the K through 12 program, has a couple of our new programs happening over the next couple of days as well. Before the break hits, we have our new Science Fridays coming up Friday, which is a selection of 3 different classes you can come and take with us on Friday. And also starting Friday is our final family camp for the year 2020. And so you and a family member, or you and a couple of family members, or the whole family can come down for a Friday afternoon, Saturday, and Sunday and stay in our dorms and go out on a research vessel, go paddle, kayak, and do several other marine activities with us here at the Dauphin Island Sea Lab as well. So we've got a lot of stuff coming up as we head towards the holiday break.
And Trisha asked if there are any excursions on the 18th or later this month, and we'll let people know if that comes about.
We do have some scheduled later this month.
Okay, we'll put them all out there.
Thank you.
All right, have a great day.